The road home stretched out before me like an old scar, familiar, faded, and aching if I pressed on it too long. 5 hours from Boston to Havenbrook with nothing but a thermos of gas station coffee and a playlist full of songs I used to sing with Chloe when we were kids. Every mile pulled me closer to a memory I wasn't sure still existed. The gifts were in the trunk wrapped so neatly they looked store-bought. I'd spent 2 nights getting them right. Paper with little gold snowflakes for Mom. A pine green box tied with burlap string for Dad. And for Chloe, a navy velvet pouch holding a silver charm bracelet with 5 charms, a book, a paintbrush, a snowflake, a heart, and a coffee cup. Little reminders of who we used to be together. I even packed extra ribbons in case I needed to rewrap anything that got crushed in the car. That's the kind of person I am. Or was. Or still am, maybe. I glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard. 4:13 p.m. Just late enough for the house to be glowing inside. I imagined it clearly, Mom at the stove smelling like cinnamon and stressed Chloe trying to sneak tastes of mashed potatoes, Dad halfway through a 6-pack while watching a football game. I'd knock, and they'd gasp. Someone would scream. Chloe would hug me so hard she'd knock my purse off my shoulder. Mom would say something dry, like, "Well, I'll be damned," but her eyes would give her away. We'd sit around the tree. I'd hand out the gifts I'd spent weeks selecting, already imagining how Mom would pretend not to love hers before hiding it in the china cabinet. We'd sip cocoa from the Santa mugs and laugh about how I couldn't ever quite stay away for long, and for the first time in years I wouldn't spend Christmas alone. That was the plan. That's what I'd rehearsed on the drive, over and over, like a speech. The closer I got, though, the tighter my grip on the wheel became. I didn't want to admit it, but my stomach had started to knot back in New Hampshire. Just a flicker of doubt at first. A shadow in the rearview mirror. Then came the questions I hated myself for asking. Why hadn't anyone called to see if I'd be coming? Why did Chloe sound so cagey in her last text? "Hope you're having a chill week, sis. We're all staying local this year." Super low-key. Why hadn't Mom asked about the gifts I hinted at in our last call? I shook it off. That's just how my family is. Not cold exactly, just efficient. Not big on mushy moments or thank you cards. It's not that they don't love me, it's that they don't say it. Not out loud. And they definitely don't say it on time. They were never the "we miss you" type. But if I showed up, they'd smile. I was sure of it. The GPS told me to turn left onto Maple Drive. There it was. My childhood home still painted that stubborn shade of blue Mom insisted was coastal serenity, even though it faded into powdery gray every winter. The porch lights were on. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone had hung a crooked wreath with a red velvet bow on the front door. The window glowed gold silhouettes moving inside. I parked at the curb, suddenly breathless. The house looked smaller than I remembered. I grabbed the gifts from the back seat, stacking them neatly in my arms, the charm bracelet pouch nestled on top. The cold nipped at my ankles as I stepped up to the door. I knocked 3 short taps. My heart thudded. I heard footsteps, then the creak of the old wooden door. And there she was. My mother. She looked exactly the same. Tight gray bun, maroon sweater, a single gold chain around her neck. Her face was neutral, not surprised, not angry, not even confused. She looked like she'd been expecting someone, just not me. "Natalie," she said, her voice flat. "Merry Christmas," I said, smiling, wide arms full of perfectly wrapped evidence that I came in peace. "I wanted to surprise you." She blinked once, slowly. "You weren't invited," she said. Her tone didn't waver. "This is for family only." I stood there, frozen. Wind cut through my coat like a blade. What I whispered, unable to process the sentence. She looked over her shoulder. I could hear laughter. Chloe's voice unmistakable, bright as always. "We have guests." Mom added quieter now, and it's already been a full house. "I'm your daughter," I said. Not yelled, not cried, just said it. A fact, like the snow falling behind me. Mom shifted her weight. "You always make things harder than they need to be, Natalie." She didn't wait for my response. The door closed. I stared at the wreath. The gifts felt heavier in my arms. I didn't knock again. I just stood there until the cold numbed everything. Then I turned, walked back to my car, and placed the charm bracelet gently on the passenger seat. I started the engine and drove away. I sat in the car with the engine running, headlights slicing through the quiet, snowy street. The house behind me was glowing like a postcard yellow light pouring out of the window's shadows, moving across the curtains. Someone laughed. It sounded like Chloe. Christmas music played faintly from inside something jazzy and old school. I recognized Mom's favorite Nat King Cole album, the kind of music she only played when she was happy. The dashboard clock blinked 5:02 p.m. I hadn't moved. The wrapped gifts still sat in the passenger seat, stacked like unopened truths. The charm bracelet pouch was slightly askew, the velvet catching the light with every tremble of the car frame. I stared at the front door. It was closed now, quiet. Sealed like I'd never been part of what was happening inside. For a minute, maybe more, I thought about going back, knocking again, telling her she misunderstood, that I'd driven 5 hours, bought presents, rearranged my entire schedule just to be here. I could say, "You didn't mean it, I know you didn't." But I didn't move, because a voice in the back of my head whispered, "She absolutely meant it." A vibration buzzed from my coat pocket. I fumbled for the phone, hands numb from the cold and whatever was happening to me, emotionally shock, I guess. A message lit up the screen. "Chloe, don't take it personal, you know how you are." That was it. No punctuation, no apology, no, "I didn't know she'd do that." Just 7 words packed like a punch to the sternum. I stared at it for a long time, reading it again and again, trying to squeeze a different meaning out of it. I couldn't. You know how you are. Too much. Too intense. Not fun. Drama queen. Uptight. Control freak. These were phrases I knew like old songs. They'd been said in hushed voices, growing up sometimes behind my back, sometimes right to my face. "You always go too deep, Natalie. Can't you just relax?" God, it's not that serious. At 12, I was told I thought too much. At 16, that I tried too hard. At 20, that I held grudges. At 27, after I didn't laugh when Chloe made a joke about me being single again, she called me emotionally exhausting. At 30, I was told by my own mother that I make things harder than they need to be. And now I was. Not family. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there and deleted the text, then deleted Chloe's contact altogether. Her name vanished from the screen like she'd never existed. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. Snow started falling harder. The street lamps cast long, watery shadows across the road. Every house I passed looked warmer than mine. I didn't even have a hotel booked. I just kept driving until I saw a blinking vacancy sign in front of a 2-story roadside inn with fake shutters and plastic wreaths in each window. Inside the lobby smelled like instant coffee and floor cleaner. The man at the front desk didn't ask why my eyes were red or why I didn't have a reservation. He handed me a key card and said, "Room 214, second floor end of the hall. Ice machine's broken, but heat works." I thanked him in a voice that didn't sound like mine. The room was clean, but tired. Beige walls, a bed with a stiff comforter, a TV I didn't turn on. I dropped my coat on the floor, left the gifts in the car, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the carpet for a long time. Then I lay back, arms splayed out, staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly. I didn't take off my shoes, didn't pull back the covers. I just lay there fully clothed, coatless, and stunned. My mind played the moment on a loop, the knock the door opening Mom's flat voice. "You weren't invited," her eyes looking past me like I was a delivery she hadn't ordered. And that text. That damn text. "You know how you are. I closed my eyes and tried to pretend I was somewhere else at a dinner party, at a beach, even just home in my apartment with takeout and a stupid holiday movie playing. But every time I blinked, I saw her face. Not angry, not sad, just done. Like I was a mess they'd finally decided not to clean up anymore. I rolled over, face buried in the stiff pillow, and let out a breath that felt like it had been sitting in my chest for years. I didn't cry, but I didn't sleep either. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of motel soap and a dull ache in my chest. I hadn't slept much, just drifted in and out of something that felt more like shutdown than rest. I showered, dressed, and sat on the bed staring at nothing while sunlight pushed through the cheap curtains like it was doing me a favor. I didn't want to think, but I did. That's the curse, isn't it? You get hurt and your brain wants to do a deep dive. Let's unpack the trauma, it says, like it's a helpful podcast host. And so I went back. Not physically. God knows I wasn't setting foot in that house again. But in my mind, I went all the way back. To when I was 16 working after school at a diner. Chloe was 13 then, and our parents used to say she was too delicate for part-time jobs. So I picked up extra shifts and handed over half my paycheck to Mom every Friday. She said it was for groceries and bills. I never questioned it. I was the responsible one. The adult in training. The one who didn't complain. I remember the first time I asked if I could keep a little for myself, maybe $20 for a new pair of jeans. Mom looked at me like I'd slapped her. Chloe needs new ballet shoes, she said, and we still have to pay off the electric. Do you want the lights off? I didn't ask again. Chloe got the ballet shoes. She always got what she needed. Not because she asked, but because everyone just gave. She had this effortless charm, a kind of chaotic sweetness that made people want to protect her. Teachers, relatives, neighbors, they all loved Chloe. They called her free-spirited, a little wild, such a heart. They called me dependable, sharp, sometimes intense. I worked through high school, kept a 4.0 GPA, took care of the house when Mom's back went out. Chloe got detention 3 times in one semester for skipping class, and Mom said, "Well, she's just not the school type. Not everyone's like you." No, no one was like me. No one was asked to carry what I carried. When I got into college on scholarship, Mom didn't cry or hug me. She said, "That's far. Who's going to help out around here?" Dad nodded like she made a solid point. I deferred a semester, worked more, saved up. And when I finally left, I sent money home every month. They needed help, and I helped. When Dad lost his job during the recession, I covered the mortgage for 6 months. When Chloe wrecked her car in junior year, I paid the deductible on the insurance and wired her money for a new used car. When Mom's dental surgery wasn't fully covered, I picked up the bill. No hesitation. And when Chloe decided she did want to go to college after all, after failing out of 2 community courses and ghosting 3 jobs, I co-signed the loan. She cried on the phone saying she wanted to get her life together. Said I was the only one who believed in her. I paid the first 2 semesters out of pocket, told myself she just needed a head start. She dropped out a year later. The money was gone. Every Christmas, birthday, emergency accident, I showed up. I filled the gaps, covered the shortfalls, made things work. I handled it. Not because I had to, but because they were my family. That's what you do, right? Except it was never what they did. It was always what I did. They were family when I signed checks, when I mailed gifts, when I fixed what they broke. That's when I got the calls. The "we miss yous," the "can't wait to see yous." But when I asked for emotional support, when I tried to open up about therapy, about burnout, about loneliness, I got silence. Dismissal. Don't be dramatic. You're overthinking it. You're always making things about feelings. I remember calling home once during my 2nd year at Wharton, right after landing an internship that had taken me months to fight for. Chloe answered. I was beaming. I just wanted to share guess who's going to intern at Rowe and Halston. She paused. Is that good? I laughed. It's one of the top 3 firms in the country. She whistled. Damn, must be nice to have your life figured out. Then she hung up. Just like that. They didn't celebrate my wins. They expected them. And they resented me for them too. So when Mom said, "You weren't invited. This is for family only," it wasn't just the words, it was the truth behind them. The confirmation of something I had been afraid to admit for years. I wasn't one of them. Not really. Not unless I was useful. Not unless I could solve something. They had their definition of family. And I didn't fit unless I was carrying the weight. All those years I thought I was building trust, showing love, proving my worth. I was just paying for proximity. And once I stopped paying, they stopped pretending. And the worst part? They didn't even say thank you. Not once. Not for the money, not for the sacrifices, not for any of it. Because in their eyes, I owed them. They didn't think I was generous. They thought I was responsible. They didn't think I was selfless. They thought I was obligated. They didn't think I loved them. They thought I worked for them. And when I stopped working, they stopped calling me family. Back in the motel room, the hum of the heating unit filled the silence like a soft, steady warning. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., but sleep wasn't even on the table. My body was still, but my brain wouldn't stop. I sat cross-legged on the bed, phone in hand, back against the wall. The sheets smelled like bleach. A half-eaten granola bar sat on the nightstand. It was the only thing I'd had since lunch yesterday. I should have gone to sleep, but something kept nagging me. That familiar itch, the one I always got when something didn't add up. So I opened my banking app, not to check my balance more out of habit than anything, but as the numbers loaded, a pit opened in my stomach. The joint account, the one I set up for family emergencies. I had linked it to a backup card years ago. It was supposed to be a lifeline for things like power shutoffs, last-minute copays, or rent shortfalls. I rarely touched it. They were supposed to let me know before using it. That was the rule. There were 3 withdrawals, all recent. $200 at a salon, $430 at a catering service, $175 at a liquor store, all dated 2 days ago. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. My fingers numb not from cold, but from the clarity sinking in. They were planning this. They were spending my money to host a holiday party they hadn't even bothered to invite me to. I zoomed in on the timestamp Friday afternoon, while I was in the office finalizing a quarterly report and mentally rehearsing how surprised they'd be when I showed up with gifts. They were buying wine and shrimp platters, on my dime. I felt it before I thought it, rage heavy and clean. Not loud, not explosive, just hot and still. Like when you realize the stove's been on all night and everything in the kitchen smells like gas. That's what this was. A quiet leak, years in the making. I stared at the screen and heard my therapist's voice from a session a few months back. People will keep taking if you never stop giving, especially if you taught them how. I'd nodded when she said it, even wrote it down. But I hadn't felt it, not like this. I clicked over to the account settings, removed Chloe's access first, then Mom's. Dad never used it. He let Mom handle the money, but I removed him too just to be safe. Then I froze the account. 1 click. No confirmation email, just a soft chime and the words, "This account is now inactive." I stared at the message like it was an obituary. Something had officially died. Then I scrolled to my contacts. Chloe, delete. Mom, delete. Dad, delete. I paused for a second before hitting the last one, not because I wanted to keep him, but because I didn't think he'd notice I was gone. Then I tapped delete. 3 decades of history. Holidays, school plays, family trips, hospital visits, all reduced to 3 vanished entries in a phone book. I should have cried, but I didn't. What I felt wasn't sadness. It was freedom. Cold, metallic freedom. The kind that didn't feel good yet, but definitely felt right. I sat there, phone in my lap, staring at the glow of the screen reflecting off the motel wallpaper. Somewhere down the hall, a TV was on low. A sitcom laugh track echoed faintly through the vents. It sounded almost like real laughter. My fingers tightened around the phone. For years, I told myself they didn't know how much I was doing, that they weren't being malicious, just overwhelmed, confused, clumsy with gratitude. But this wasn't clumsy. This was calculated. They didn't forget to include me. They planned without me. They used my money, laughed in my absence, then closed the door in my face. That wasn't confusion. That was clarity, on their part, and now on mine. I leaned back against the wall and let out a slow, sharp breath. If I'm not family, I whispered to no one, then I don't owe them a damn thing. It didn't feel like a declaration. It felt like the truth. Clean. Simple. Final. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. Sat there in the dim motel room, surrounded by silence and the hollow echo of boundaries finally set. The motel heater hummed again, steady and warm, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel cold. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. I picked it because it was neutral, neither mine nor theirs. A budget-friendly business suite inside a Holiday Inn near the interstate. No childhood photos on the wall, no familiar furniture. Just a long table, 12 stiff chairs, and a whiteboard no one would use. I got there 20 minutes early and laid out the folder in front of the center seat. Inside was everything: bank statements, PayPal receipts, Venmo transfers, tuition payments, loan cosign forms, credit card records. A line-by-line breakdown of the $96,218.36 I'd given or covered over the past 13 years. No one could say they didn't know anymore. At 11:00 sharp, the door opened. Mom walked in first, her lips pressed tight, sunglasses still on indoors. Chloe followed, phone in hand, chewing gum. Dad trailed behind, quiet as ever. He gave me a small nod like we were co-workers on opposite sides of a meeting we both didn't want to attend. They sat. No one said hello. I didn't either. I slid the folder forward. This, I said, calm and steady, is what I've given this family, financially, over the years. Mom looked at the folder like it might bite her. Is this really necessary? I think so, I said. Chloe let out a short laugh, sharp and defensive. Oh my God, are you doing a PowerPoint next? No, I said. Just the facts. I stayed seated. No yelling, no crying, just the numbers, the breakdown, the truth, mortgage payments after Dad got laid off, Chloe's first car, her second car, tuition, groceries, rent, medical bills, Christmas gifts, utility bills, even Mom's credit card minimums, remember those. Mom crossed her arms. We never asked for most of that. You didn't need to, I said. You expected it. Dad shifted in his chair, cleared his throat like he was going to speak, but didn't. I'm not here to shame anyone, I continued. I'm here to say this: it's over. I'm done. Chloe stopped chewing. What do you mean, done? I mean, I said, looking her directly in the eye, you will not receive another cent from me. No bills, no emergencies, no last-minute transfers, no more access to anything. Mom scoffed. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being final. She leaned forward, voice sharp. So this is what revenge? No, I said again. This is accountability. I let that hang in the air. No one moved. The other night, I continued, I drove 5 hours with a trunk full of gifts and hope. I knocked on the door. You looked me in the eye and said, this is for family only. Mom opened her mouth, but I kept going. And then I checked the bank account and saw what you spent my money on that party, 2 days before I arrived. Chloe rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. It's Christmas. It's theft, I said plainly. Dad finally spoke, voice low. We didn't think you'd notice. That stung more than I expected. He wasn't even trying to defend it. I always notice, I said. I just stopped saying anything. Mom looked irritated now, defensive. This isn't how family handles things. Dragging everyone to some conference room like it's a court hearing. You're right, I said. Family doesn't handle things this way. But then again, family doesn't steal from each other or shut each other out in the cold. Chloe leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So what? This is it. You're cutting us off. Forever. I'm setting a boundary, I said. One that should have been there a long time ago. No one spoke. I stood up, picked up my purse, left the folder on the table. I don't expect gratitude, I said as I stepped toward the door. But I do expect respect. And until I see that I'm gone. Mom's voice followed me sharp and rising. Natalie, don't walk out like this. I paused, hand on the door handle, turned halfway back. I said what I came to say. I told her, voice still calm. This chapter's closed. Then I opened the door, walked out, and didn't look back. Aunt June answered the door in fleece socks and a paint-stained sweatshirt that read, "I'm not yelling, I'm projecting." The sight of her alone cracked something open in me somewhere between relief and grief I hadn't known I was holding. "You look like hell," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I feel like it," I replied, wiping my boots on the mat. Her cottage was small 2 bedrooms and a sunroom that doubled as an art studio. The whole place smelled like rosemary and firewood. A few tea lights flickered on a windowsill above the kitchen sink. It felt lived-in quiet and warm in a way I hadn't felt in years. We hadn't spoken much over the last decade, not out of malice but distance, literal and emotional. I moved to Boston. She moved to nowhere in particular. She was the black sheep of the family, the radical who moved out west, taught yoga to ex-convicts, sold paintings at local markets. Mom called her irresponsible. Chloe called her weird. I called her the first moment I realized I had no one else. She didn't ask questions on the phone, just said, "Get in the car, I'll make stew." Now, as I dropped my bag by the door and unwrapped my scarf, she poured 2 glasses of red wine and handed me one. "To bridges not burned, but properly closed," she said, clinking her glass against mine. We sat by the fireplace on mismatched cushions, the quiet between us more comforting than any forced catch-up. After a few sips, I finally said it out loud. They shut the door in my face. June didn't flinch. "I know." I looked at her. "You do." "Your mom's been like that since she was 13, she said. "Some people think withholding love gives them power, like rationing out warmth keeps them in control." I blinked hard, willing myself not to cry. She said I wasn't invited, that it was for family only. My voice cracked. And then Chloe texted me, "You know how you are," like I was some defective machine they'd finally stopped pretending to fix. June took another sip. "They used to say that to me too." I glanced at her. "You're too sensitive. Too much. Too opinionated," she continued. "The family loved me until I stopped making myself small." I leaned back against the couch. 10 years ago you told me something. At Chloe's graduation party." She smiled. "I was drinking boxed sangria and making a scene. Sounds about right. You pulled me aside and said, 'Love without respect isn't love. It's control with better PR.'" June nodded slowly like she'd forgotten, but agreed with herself all over again. "I thought you were bitter," I said. "Back then. I thought you'd just given up on them." "I didn't give up," she said. "I stopped bleeding for people who handed me knives." I sat in silence, letting that settle. You know, for a long time I thought if I was useful enough, good enough, reliable enough, they'd see me. I admitted. Really see me. Not as the fixer or the money machine, but as someone they actually wanted. "That's the trick," she said. "When you give endlessly, people don't see a person, they see a resource." I froze the accounts, cut off the money, told them I was done. She raised her glass in approval. "Takes guts. They acted like I'd betrayed them." June leaned forward. "Of course they did, because your boundaries feel like violence to people who benefited from your lack of them." I stared into the fire, thinking of Chloe's face in that conference room, of Mom's voice cracking like I'd broken some sacred code. Sometimes I said I wonder if I'm becoming cold. June tilted her head. "You know what cold is? Cold is shutting the door on your daughter in the middle of winter. Cold is spending her money and pretending she doesn't exist. Cold is expecting loyalty without reciprocity. She placed her hand over mine. "You're not cold, Natalie. You're healing." We sat like that for a while. No more speeches, no more defenses. Later that night, I stayed in her guest room. The bedding smelled like lavender, and the window opened just enough to let in the sound of trees brushing against the side of the house. On the nightstand was a little card that read, "Sometimes surviving your family is your greatest act of self-love." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was from her. I lay on my side, hand tucked under my cheek, and exhaled fully for the first time in days. I didn't feel repaired, or whole, or even okay, really. But I felt safe, and that was enough for now. The scissors hovered just above my shoulder. I looked at myself in the mirror, hand steady, heart racing not from fear, but something deeper. Anticipation. Permission. I hadn't cut my hair in 5 years. Not really. A trim here and there, always keeping it long because Mom said it softened my face. "Sharp women shouldn't look too sharp," she once said, brushing it behind my ears before a family photo. "You already come off cold." I cut 4 inches off in a single snip. It fell into the sink like a weight I'd been carrying and pretending I couldn't feel. Then I cut more. By the time I was done, the mirror showed someone familiar and entirely new. A version of me that had always been waiting. Later that day, I walked into a boutique near Aunt June's town square. Not a department store. Not something practical. Just racks of color and shape and things that made no promises to be versatile or modest. I tried on a mustard yellow sweater that hugged my shoulders and made my skin glow. Then a pair of boots I definitely didn't need but loved. I didn't text anyone to ask if it looked good. I just bought it. Because I liked it. Small act. Huge shift. That evening back at June's, I pulled out a box from her attic. My old art supplies. She kept them all these years. I hadn't touched a brush since sophomore year of college. At the time, I was told by a well-meaning professor, by my mother, by myself, that it was a distraction, that I should focus. So I did. I focused. On work, on support, on them. And somewhere in that tunnel vision, I stopped making anything that didn't generate income or approval. But that night, I dipped the brush in water, mixed it with ochre and plum, and let my wrist move without permission. The canvas stayed blank for only a few seconds before the first shape appeared, a burst of color, no plan, no product. Just expression. I painted for hours, the quiet filled with nothing but brush strokes and the occasional hum of June's wind chimes. When I stepped back, my fingers were stained, my back ached, and I felt human again. The next morning, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, created a new investment portfolio. I labeled it My Life. No co-signers, no shared access, no quiet siphoning in the name of family. This account would fund my travels, my studio supplies, my eventual escape to the coast. I'd always managed other people's crises like a full-time CFO. Now I was the startup. The deposits started small, just what I could spare after rent and a few necessities, but every dollar felt like a vote for myself. And as I typed in the first auto-transfer rule, I remembered something Mom once said during an argument when I was 24. No man is ever going to want someone who acts like a spreadsheet. I'd been quiet then, swallowed it, pretended it didn't bruise. But now I laughed. Out loud. I'd been called a lot of things over the years, too. Smart, too blunt, too controlling, too serious, too cold. I used to flinch at those words, tried to warm them up, sand them down, make myself easier to digest. Not anymore. Too smart. That intelligence paid their bills for a decade. Too cold. That composure held a family together long after it stopped deserving to be held. Too much no. I wasn't too much. I was too generous with people who gave me too little. And now I was done apologizing for having depth, clarity, and boundaries. I walked into town that afternoon and smiled at strangers. Not the brittle smile of someone trying to appear fine, but the quiet ease of someone learning to take up space. At a cafe, I ordered the decadent coffee with whipped cream and cinnamon on top. No one told me I didn't need it. No one rolled their eyes. I sat by the window and painted with a travel set June had gifted me that morning. The sun hit the page just right. The colors bled together in a way I hadn't planned and didn't need to fix. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't solving anyone else's problems. I was building something of my own, me, my life, my way. Christmas morning came softly. No alarm, no rush, just the smell of cinnamon tea and the sound of a dog snoring at the foot of my bed. His name was Bear, an old mutt Aunt June found limping behind the post office a month ago, half blind, all heart. He followed her everywhere now and for some reason had decided I was acceptable too. I stretched, pulled on a sweatshirt, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. June was already at the stove humming something jazzy under her breath while stirring a pot of marinara. Yes, spaghetti, on Christmas. Everyone does ham or turkey, she'd said. Let's do carbs and garlic like the heretics we are. By noon, the cottage was full just the right amount. June's best friend Valerie showed up with a tray of lemon bars and a bottle of something sparkly. Her partner Marcus brought paper crowns from a cracker set and made us all wear them. We ate at the kitchen table, mismatched chairs, and all paper napkins folded neatly beside chipped plates. No crystal, no formalities, just good food laughter that didn't cut, and people who didn't ask for anything but my presence. I had made small watercolor bookmarks for everyone, nothing fancy, just something personal. Valerie cried when she saw hers. No one's made me anything since 3rd grade, she said, hugging me so tight I almost dropped my drink. June gifted me a new set of brushes and a tiny leather-bound sketchbook. Marcus gave me a weird little desk plant that looked half dead already. It's a survivor, he said. Like you. I actually laughed until I had to wipe my eyes. And somewhere between the garlic bread and the second round of lemon bars, I realized something was missing. But not in the way I used to feel it. There was no tension, no vague undercurrent of someone being disappointed or someone else being ignored, no fake cheer, no walking on eggshells, just quiet, genuine peace. I stepped outside for air after lunch. June's porch wrapped around the front of the house draped in white Christmas lights she'd installed with Valerie 2 weeks ago. They weren't symmetrical, and half of them blinked out of sync, but they were beautiful anyway. I stood there for a long time breathing in the crisp air, Bear curled up beside me like a furry furnace. Inside, Marcus was telling a story about a church Christmas play gone horribly wrong. Laughter echoed through the walls. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't check it. But habit is hard to break. One message. Chloe. Can we talk? That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just 5 words. For a second, I stared at it. Not with anger, not with hope. Just clarity. I imagined what she might say if I replied. Probably a watered-down version of remorse. Probably a request. Probably something like, I didn't know it would go that far, or, you misunderstood. But I hadn't. I knew exactly what happened. I lived it. I looked at the message one last time, then hit delete. It vanished. And I didn't feel loss. I felt relief. I slid my phone back into my pocket, sat down on the porch swing, and pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Bear sighed heavily and rested his chin on my foot. Inside, June's laughter rose again, rich and real. The kind that made your chest feel warm. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. For so long, I had chased a version of Christmas I thought I was supposed to have. The big family, the firelit living room, the traditions. I thought if I worked hard enough, gave enough, proved myself enough, I'd earn it. But sitting on that porch with lights blinking haphazardly above me and a dog snoring on my feet, I knew the truth. I didn't need the perfect picture. I needed this. No performance, no obligations, no hidden costs. Just people who saw me, who wanted me present but not polished, who laughed with me, not at me, who didn't ask me to shrink to fit their comfort zone. The kind of love that didn't make me earn it. I looked out at the trees lining the property, bare and still and beautiful. Turns out I wasn't missing family, I murmured. I reached down and scratched behind Bear's ear as he leaned in closer. I was missing peace. 6 months later, I didn't recognize my own life. And that was the best part. I woke up early these days not out of panic but peace. I made strong coffee, walked Bear around the block and opened the windows to let the morning in. My apartment was small, sunlit, and finely mine, the kind of place with imperfect hardwood floors and walls full of art I actually made. My days had rhythm now, not the relentless hustle I used to wear like armor, but real structure, chosen routines. I started working part-time as a financial counselor at a women's shelter, a role that let me use the skills I'd honed for years, but in a way that felt clean, generous, purposeful. Once a week, I mentored women who were rebuilding their lives after escaping toxic families, partners, systems. I never told them my full story. I didn't need to. We recognized each other without words. I used to think setting boundaries made me a bad person, one woman said over tea after a workshop. Me too, I told her. But turns out it just makes you a free one. Therapy helped. Slowly. I learned how to name things: emotional, labor gaslighting, enmeshment, survival, response. I stopped over-explaining, stopped apologizing for things I hadn't caused, stopped making room for people who never made room for me. I painted again, regularly, sold a few small pieces at local markets. The money didn't matter, it was the act of creation that did. Of making space for beauty that didn't fix anyone, didn't prove anything. And I laughed more. Not the brittle, polite laugh I used to fake during family dinners, but the kind that sneaks up on you full-bodied and real. It echoed through the walls of my little apartment and didn't feel like an echo of someone else's voice. It was mine. One Friday morning while sifting through emails, I saw it. Subject line, "I'm sorry," from Dad. I stared at it for a long time. It was short, just a few paragraphs. He didn't defend himself, didn't make excuses, said he should have spoken up more, that he should have stopped Mom, that he didn't realize how far it had gone. He said he missed me, that he hoped maybe we could meet someday. Coffee, a walk, something simple. He signed it "Love, Dad," like nothing had changed. But everything had. I didn't delete it, but I didn't respond either. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't chasing anymore. Not after people, not after peace, not after approval. I'd stopped knocking on locked doors, especially the ones that were bolted from the inside. Maybe one day I'd reply. Maybe I wouldn't. That choice was mine now, and that alone was healing. I closed the laptop, poured another cup of coffee, and sat by the window. Outside, kids were biking up and down the sidewalk, their laughter rising like music in the breeze. A neighbor across the way watered her plants, her toddler watching curiously from the stoop. June was coming over later. We were going to the beach with Bear. She'd packed sandwiches and lemonade, and we planned to paint by the dunes like two retired eccentrics who finally stopped caring what anyone thought. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not my worth. Not my strength. Not my loyalty. I had nothing to earn. Just a life to live. I looked around my space, the books, the dried flowers, the watercolor still drying on the windowsill, and felt a fullness I used to think only came from family. But that wasn't entirely true. Family wasn't supposed to hurt like that. It wasn't supposed to be something you performed for, paid into, begged to be part of. It wasn't supposed to leave you out in the cold, while it spent your kindness like loose change. It wasn't supposed to cost your self-worth. I thought I'd lost everything the night they shut the door, but I didn't lose a family that night. I saw the truth, and I walked into my own life instead.